Hey everybody, welcome to the show, revisiting an old TNG episode. We're doing this for Patreon. If you're listening to the show from the start of TNG, this might sound a little bit weird how the audio quality has jumped to a better place, a more natural sounding place. But we're going to be doing this.
Wes, you don't have to. I mean, I'm just human. You don't have to heap this praise on me here.
We're going to be we're jumping into the future. If you're listening to this now live on the TNG feed, it's 7 years later.
I don't, at this point, if you're listening from the start, I haven't done one yet, I don't think.
Oh, no, you must have.
My first one is Angel one before this?
It is. This is the 20th episode of the first season. Yeah, so you're before this. So Clay is here full time now, and otherwise...
Hey, guys.
This is, we're just going to be revisiting this for the patrons. This will eventually go out on the live feed, which is all the way of saying that if you're listening to this on the podcast feed, this was a Patreon special, and now it's available to you, but hello, patrons as well. We're going to be talking about the Arsenal of Freedom right now, revisiting it because only I was there for the original one, and there's no reason to keep those episodes where it's just me talking to myself around, even though this one is starting out that way. But Clay, we're going to take a break, play some music, and we'll be back and break down the Arsenal of Freedom.
Accessing library computer data.
To make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise.
All right, Clay, so much like the first one we did with this, which was A Measure of a Man in Time for Picard, where we revisited the Measure of a Man episode from the second season, the first thing that leaps out to you about early TNG is just how derivative of TOS it was, really. Like, it's really just an updated TOS episode. And it's something that when we were going through TNG, I never really thought of or noticed because we did TOS after TNG, but it's just so noticeable how everything about them just screams like this is an updated version of the original series with a new cast, and otherwise it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's a weird mix of what the old show was and what the new show would be. Because I feel like about 80% of this episode is goofy bullshit, and then, which reminds me of the TOS show, and the other 20% is also goofy bullshit, but it's like proto stuff that they would deal with later in the show. I'm speaking specifically about the stuff with Geordi and the man. I thought Tasha was the most underrated character. How about Chief Engineer Logan? Huh?
he's one of if you don't remember, there's like 5 different chief engineers in the first season. He's one of them. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, too bad he never came back.
But it's coming up and screaming at Geordi about things.
But it's like some of that stuff was a little bit more like I feel like you wouldn't see that on the old show as much, that sort of element.
No, they certainly focus on the broadness of the cast more than TOS ever did. I think they still kind of like, to make it feel like TOS, they still have this kind of like rapid fire bouncing where Picard is the centerpiece that's listening to everything, and then people are just kind of chiming in with ping pong dialogue. Like everyone has one line and it bounces back and forth. They do that to set it up, which that feels very original series to me, in that it's a lot of like brief feedback coming back to Picard, who makes the decision. And in the TOS's case, it's Kirk making that decision.
Yeah, and also in line with the original show, that planet they go to looks like absolute dog shit.
Yes, the set design on the planet.
Yeah, they really that first season they did a lot of their planets were like sparsely propped, and then just had a big blue screen in the background, or like a big like the throne room scene in Last Jedi.
Yep. Yeah, it's like an unfinished. It's almost like they didn't want to superimpose an image on it. They just got to put up the blue screen, and we're like, this is the alien world.
It's this like cheap way of creating this faux horizon with like a skylighting or something, and I just couldn't get over how terrible this show looked. Like it was.
I find it kind of like, charming, actually. I find the set design of that planet a little bit charming. Yeah.
It's just so. I mean, those hokey little things that they're shooting at, or who's shooting at them, are really goofy. The Enterprise, I thought, looked like garbage. It's just. It's not lit well at all. It's just really dank looking.
You're talking about the exterior or the interior of the ship?
The exterior looks great. You know, they've redone all that stuff. But yeah, the bridge, just the lighting felt so I guess dank is the best way to use, because I think of that set, maybe it's the time it was shot, because this was 1987, which still blows my mind that it was the Star Trek The Next Generation started the year after Miami Vice.
Yeah, well, this is actually interestingly. I guess I forgot to do the intro here, but this came out in 1988 actually. So it's only 1 year off, but it is 1988 for those people who nerd out about the dates and stuff. But yeah, the point, it doesn't change your point. Yeah,
it's still. I mean, Star Trek The Next Generation, I think, gets talked about as more of an 90s show, but it is solidly in the 80s. Mm-hmm. It's definitely got 1 foot deep up in the 80s.
It spent half of its lifetime in the 80s. It was from 87 to 93. So it splits the difference, basically.
Commander Data, Lieutenant Yar.
Sir, other than ourselves, I'm picking up no life signs here.
I know.
Riker, you didn't answer me. Who sent you here to look for me?
Your mother. She's worried about you.
Tell me about your ship, Riker. It's the Enterprise, isn't it?
No, the name of my ship is the Lollipop.
I have no knowledge of that ship.
It's just been commissioned. It's a good ship.
Refresh me, would you, Riker? What's its size, its complement?
Who is here with you?
What's the armament on the Lollipop?
Paul, I will only answer your questions if you answer mine. Why do you want to know so much about my ship?
Yeah, to get it out of the way, just for completion's sake, this is the Arsenal of Freedom. It's the 21st episode of the first season. I think it's 20th, though. They're counting Farpoint as 2 episodes. Aired on the April 11th, 1988. Teleplay goes to Richard Manning and Hans Beimler, who we know from DS9 more recently. Story credit goes to Maurice Hurley, who was one of the showrunners at this point, and Robert Lewin, directed by Les Landau, who's been a Star Trek director forever. In this episode, Geordi LaForge takes the Enterprise into battle while Captain Picard and an away team are trapped on the planet Minos, taking fire from a dangerous automated weapons system. I didn't listen back to the original podcast I did for this one, Clay, but I remember why this is one of my top 5 episodes of the first season quite strongly.
Because it's like barely got its head above water.
Because it's competent. Yeah, it's not anything great shakes. It's probably a 3 out of 5.
It took 4 people to come up with this story. I mean, to be fair, it feels like it was 4 people, because it feels like 2 very different episodes kind of like mashed together.
But the thing that stuck out to me, and you've been removed from the first season of Star Trek for a while, so I have too. It's not like I rewatched these, but this one stuck out to me as the first episode that they actually used the fact that they had a fairly large cast compared to TOS at this point, and did divergent storylines with everybody. So everyone had something to do. And before this, a lot of the episodes really felt like they were dragging, because it's a lot of people working on one problem at the same time. And Arsenal, even if it's not a great episode, I do think that it splits the cast up and keeps the pace of the episode going pretty strongly because of the multiple storylines that they've got going on, where a lot of the storylines are on the planet and it's Geordi on the Enterprise, but at least you're checking in with different groups throughout the episode, and they all have their own problems to deal with.
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually thought, and if you're new to the podcast and this is your first listen through, you will find out shortly that I'm a big Tasha Yar apologist. I actually thought she was the most interesting character in the episode, because she showed the most character. Like at the beginning, not only does she think that like Riker is a dumbass, she actually, I don't know if they've ever done this again. When Picard sends the away team down and Riker gives the order, she actually goes, "No, that's not a great idea. Maybe we should do it this way." And he's like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah.
Like she actually is engaged with the decision-making process.
They're big in early TNG is very big into structure of command, chain of command type stuff. They do the same.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, they do the same with this was kind of this was one of the first episodes too where they broke from the thing where Picard no longer beams down to the planet like Kirk did, which was a big change. And Deanna Troi calls him out on it and says it's not a good idea, and he says no, and he goes down anyway. It makes it for a more entertaining show if the captain is allowed to go down occasionally.
Yeah, and I do like that him going down wasn't the first move. that it was something that he and Crusher go down as a secondary move. I think that makes it the captain leaving the ship a little bit more special, I think.
Yeah. He goes down to rescue Riker, who's been frozen, and he gets shot by the little floating shampoo bottle and is frozen. Yeah.
After some tour de force acting from Jonathan Frakes in this episode.
There's that scene where he talks about the lollipop being a good ship. I still think that's a very strong stretch of dialogue from TNG for, like he gets a little bit fired up when he's talking to that imaginary friend of his, and he's like, "You know who I am. Say who I am."
The best part of it is when what's his name? Rice?
Paul Rice, yeah.
Paul Rice says something, and then Riker just goes, "Your mother." She says hi. But there's the part where he gets fired. There's one stretch where he gets fired up where it was like they must have been running low on time or something, because he should have done a second take.
when he sneaks around the tree, he uses the palm tree as a little bit of business, and he's like, "You know who I am. Say my name."
That's it. Yes.
I do. It's that scene sticks out to me. It's very memorable for being an early season thing, and the other thing that's funny when you go back is that Riker had a really different role in the early seasons than he eventually settled into. He's much more of the analog to Kirk in how he talks to people and what he does on the away missions and things like that. And he's almost more prominent in the early seasons than he becomes. And it's almost a shame, because I like Riker a lot as a character, but Picard steps forward and he recedes a little bit as the show wears on. But I like him in this. Everyone is very eager, I guess would be the way to describe it. And the thing, especially because we're in the midst of Picard right now, Patrick Stewart sticks out as he's so much younger seeming in these. He looks almost the same, but he's got a much more youthful energy, and the way that he plays Picard is much more curt and businesslike, which they kind of play off of in his storyline, where he falls into the hole with Crusher and he has to tend to her in a role reversal where he gets to be the Doctor. Yeah,
that was I was kind of hoping that Crusher would take a little bit more initiative in that situation, being the Doctor. Mm-hmm. Picard would be terrible. There's a certain point where I thought he was just doing business and was not actually going to do something that looked like he was helping, where he grabs a stick and he breaks the stick and just shoves it under her arm. And I was like, is he not even going to tie that up? But then he eventually does. But I was kind of hoping it would be more of Crusher. Obviously this is something that I think you do on a show where you have a better handle on your characters, but I was hoping it was would Crusher be more telling him what to do, You're or right, even she's got a busted arm, but she's tying the thing with her teeth. Yeah.
It's that thing where Data always is just ahead and he has to tell the person how to use the computer properly.
Yeah.
Kind of scene.
Yeah.
Here it's early enough TNG where they're just archetypes, and the writing would would think that just the fact that the Doctor can't be a Doctor is enough for this plot line and in this style of writing that they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that really doesn't work for me in this episode is that
did you generally like it, or did you feel this was a season 1 thing, or do you think going back to it was enough of a nostalgia kick?
If I had watched all of season 1, maybe I would have liked this more. But since this is the first season 1 episode I've watched, probably since I did Angel 1 5 years ago or 6 years ago or however long it was, I don't. It especially coming off of Picard and coming off of Deep Space Nine, I spent the whole time watching this going God, Deep Space Nine was so good. Because it's so goofy and it's just so, as I was going to say, the thing that doesn't work for me overall is that I don't really feel like it's about anything. Mm-hmm. And you just have these disparate elements sort of happening that aren't really driving towards any theme of the episode, which is stuff that they get a lot better at as the show goes on. And the fact that it takes coming down to the last 30 seconds of the kill shot for bleeding out Dr. Crusher to suggest they unplug the machine.
Right. Yeah.
You got Data is there. He's not even he was like, what if we click the off button on the machine? It seemed like it wasn't the plotting didn't really seem like it was driving towards anything. The stuff with Geordi was kind of interesting, but even there, I think they kind of I don't know. I think in a later show it would have been more interesting because I was really getting into it when the ship almost gets blown up and then he calls down for Logan to come up out of the engine room because I thought he was actively going to like give up command.
Right.
And I guess in that case they did their job because they got me to think that was going to happen, which I thought would have been a more interesting story. But it's just I didn't feel like the stuff with Geordi was really meant anything other than the little story they were telling there, and the stuff on the planet seemed like it didn't mean anything at all.
Yeah.
Like I didn't coming out at the end after you get this whole revelation about what happened, which I think is essentially the plot of the movie Forbidden Planet. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
There's not like an aha moment coming out of there. It was just 20 minutes of running around on a planet getting shot by a floaty thing.
Yeah.
It rang really hollow for me overall.
I think that the reason I find it bearable, I suppose, is because I do view it as a TOS update in a lot of ways.
Sure,
and so
sure.
If you look at it, the episode is kind of about like it's a parable about arms deals, which is that like there's this idea that we're going to sci-fi this idea of dealing arms, and it's probably based off Iran-Contra stuff and things like that of the time, where we're going to have this species who provides arms to both sides of a war, and we ourselves, ironically, are killed by the great war materials that we're making. So that's kind of what the episode is about. It doesn't really comment on that. It's just using that as like the setup for an action-adventure episode.
Right.
And I would agree with you that the writing in later TNG, if it were to do this again, would probably thread some kind of character story into that, or make that more of like a ethical conundrum. Like you'd actually meet the people who were wiped out by the weapons and what they were like and kind of things like that. But here, it's really just a backdrop to have sort of a goofy action-adventure episode that is just them running around on a planet while Geordi deals with the problem up in space. And I kind of like it just for how simple and like thoughtless it is in a lot of ways. And again, compared to the rest of season 1 episodes, this is almost like Shakespearean in how its production came along. So I do like it as just one of the standouts of an early season, just in the fact that it's I don't think there are horrible episode killing errors in this episode compared to a lot of the other ones this early.
Sure.
It even has the very TOS thing of the actor, I forget the actor's name, but the guy who plays the AI salesman at the end.
Oh yeah, Vincent Schiavelli.
Yeah, Vincent Schiavelli.
Yeah.
He's even very TOS-y, where characters like that in TOS were always a bit of like a quote-unquote character. Like they were always a little bit broad or a little bit goofy, and he's a exaggerated salesman character. And TNG would go away from doing that as it moved on, but TOS always embraced that. When you have this small role, make it as big as possible to make it memorable, and it feels very reminiscent of that stuff.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that they were actually going to run into that guy in real life, and he was going to be like the only one left or something.
Right.
So at least that point, you could get that point of view of the man who's selling arms to both sides of the war ends up the only one left, having destroyed the planet. You know, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Very Twilight Zone-y. But yeah, he's definitely very arch in his portrayal. I mean, that guy is good at that stuff, so it was a good casting, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you liked Yar in this one. I like Picard. I like the way that Patrick Stewart plays early Picard in a lot of ways. I think that the cast is generally pretty good in this one for how early it is. I mean, the focus on Geordi as kind of a young up-and-comer who's not the chief engineer is always a little bit funny. But Worf is still stuck in his early TNG of he was just supposed to be the background Klingon at this point, and he doesn't really have much to do.
Kills it there.
Absolutely crushes it. Michael Dorn doing good work. But otherwise, I thought everyone was pretty solid in this. Like you see the basic entry point for these characters, and you'll see where they develop to. But I certainly no one was embarrassing, and there's no Wesley Crusher in this episode. I think interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing that really sticks out as an early TNG episode is they were still doing the saucer separation at this point in the series for any reason whatsoever.
Still trying to make that happen.
It's
was there one guy behind the scenes who was just really championing that was Rick Berman popping his head in being like, I really think this episode, I think a good opportunity for the saucer to detach.
I mean, they every time it does it, they just replay the same shots of it happening that they did in the pilot. So I assume they just didn't want to waste that effect. It's one of those things that it makes sense, right? On like the other funny thing about TNG is that Roddenberry, for as like highfalutin as his concepts about where humanity would be and sort of this like fantasy version of there is no conflict and everything, he seemed really enamored with making everything else almost too realistic to a point. Yeah. Like he wanted Yar's death to be ho-hum and not very narratively interesting because he's like, security officers just die and no one cares about that, so why doesn't she just die? But the other thing is the insistence on the saucer separating, which makes sense that you'd put virtually all the crew on the saucer, and then the star drive, I think they call it, goes back to the dangerous zone to deal with a skeleton crew. It's just kind of unnecessary in terms of narrative.
I would like it more if the battle bridge looked cooler, but like the separated thing, it looks like they didn't even think about what it would look like when you take the saucer off. They just did it. And
it looks like a dark universe version of the Enterprise bridge. It's pretty similar to it.
Well, I mean the exterior too.
The exterior, sure.
They take that piece off, and it just looks like this weird, stunted half of a model.
Yeah,
like I
always think it looks like a duck with its head cut off, sort of, at that point.
Kind of, yes. Yeah, and I think it's funny at this point because they're still, I think, getting a handle on how to shoot stuff in this show, and especially in the bridge, because, man, Ensign Zoo probably gets the least flattering shot I've ever seen in an episode of Star Trek.
Is she the female ensign?
Yeah,
who is also
she's also the female lead in Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Oh, interesting.
There is actually 2 Sylvester Stallone connections in this episode because the guy that plays Paul Rice is the the guy who tries to take over the supermarket at the beginning of Cobra.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, they cut to like a side shot when she gives some dialogue, and those weird ass curved seats that make you have to like sit hunched over, and that unflattering suit that they're wearing is like all bunched up around her chest. And it's just the most unflattering shot I've ever seen on the show.
No, I remember that shot specifically. Her breasts just look all akimbo and stuff. Like she looks like she's uncomfortable. She's folded into this chair, and the uniform is just kind of hugging her body unnaturally and sort of bunching up underneath her. Yeah, it's really, really pretty
She
awkward.
Looks like, you ever see that the South Park episode where they're like playing video games against the dude in his basement?
Yes, yeah.
She looks like that, where she's like, she looks like she should be talking like this.
Yeah, they were obviously trying to make the bridge very comfortable and like a luxury liner and stuff like that, but the curved chair doesn't do much for the people who have to sit in those. I think they raised those chairs through the series too, because
I think they do. Yeah,
people look very low in them, like they're almost sitting on their ass on the ground in them in the early seasons. I think they raised them to make just the camera angles make more sense and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I was trying to figure why you would design it like that, and I was thinking the design of the Enterprise bridge seems to be such that you could get essentially everybody in the shot without blocking anybody.
Right.
Because you've got that raised back piece, and you've got that, kind of cut out middle, and then the guys in the front are kind of tipped back a little bit and kind of curved downward, so they're not straight up blocking everybody. It's why in the original show everybody's always like leaning over the front of the console when they're doing stuff.
Just to make sure they got the angle on it. No, that's it's definitely what it is. So it's like movie theater seats. The people in the front row aren't blocking Picard in the camera shots that they're doing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I think the design is obviously it's a solid design because they kept it for 7 seasons, and it's more or less become the way that they design these now to varying degrees, whether it's I think Discovery has like stairs or something leading up to the captain's chair, but there's definitely like a multi-level effect in most of these bridges. Yeah.
Discovery's a little bit more reminiscent of Kirk, who's on kind of an elevated pedestal in the original Enterprise ship and stuff like that. And the battle bridge has its cue from that, where it's only the single chair. It's just the captain chair in the center of the room, as opposed to the counselor and first officer. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it. Let's take a break. We'll play an audio clip, and then we'll come back, give our final thoughts about the Arsenal of Freedom.
Give me some options, Data, quickly.
Why don't you just shut it off?
Is that possible?
Why not? It's a machine, isn't it?
Shut it off.
Why? You haven't seen half of what this beauty can do.
We've seen enough.
Does that mean you're going to buy it?
Yes, we've seen enough. You made a sale.
You won't be sorry.
Good. Now end the demonstration.
Done.
All right, so if you enjoyed the content today, the best way to support the show and to get more of these revisits going, if you're interested in these revisits, is to go to patreon.com/thepenskyfile. A couple dollars a month gets you extra stuff. And as always, our Captain tier supporters get a shout out. Special thanks go to Andrew Cherlog, Ben Douglas, Captain Cork, Cardinal Doomsday, Christian Michaels, Christian Pouch, Darth Mosk, David Beardmore, David K, Dwayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, HH28, Jacob123, Jeffrey Koch, Joint Mango, Jordan Cooper, Kevin Reyes, Kyle Barrett, Matt Courier, Matt Cutler, Matt Ross, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Nick Sergi, Robert Cummins, Russell Elwood, Samuel Custer, Grim Santos, Sean, Stefan Minton, Tarek Latif, Tom Hiles, Vault 13 Hero, and Will Yates. Thank you very much for supporting the show. What'd you think, Clay, about revisiting early? We saw Measure of a Man, so it's not like we're totally alien to this at this point, but this is a first season episode, which is a special kind of TNG episode. I know you don't have the memory of it. Would you rank this towards the top, bottom, or middle of your season one expeditions, if you remember much of anything? Angel One always comes up as your negative, so.
It's the only one I remember.
Yeah.
That one and the death of Tasha Yar are the only two I remember. How many did I do?
You did a few. Let me actually look that up. As you thought that Skin of Evil was actually a bad episode, which is the death of Tasha Yar.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't like Angel One. The other ones you did are Angel One, Too Short a Season, which is the old Admiral. Do you remember that one?
Where he tries to get younger?
Yes, he takes the drug that makes him younger. Yep.
Yeah. What did I think of that one?
You hated that one.
Yeah, okay.
Home Soil, which is the Ugly Bags of Mostly Water episode with the little crystal alien. Heart of Glory, which is the first Klingon episode. And then Skin of Evil and The Neutral Zone, which is the Romulans make their reappearance and they thaw out those other people from the 21st century or something.
Oh, no memory.
That was a bad episode. That's a very bad one, too.
Did I like any of those?
You liked...
Spoiler alert if you're watching this.
You liked Heart of Glory and Home Soil. I think you both gave those 3s. So that's it. Yep.
I don't know, man. This is a tough one because I feel like the curve that you're grading it on is not one that I can really relate to.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to give, if I was giving, man, I wish I remembered what the 3 episodes better. But based on this and the ones that I do remember, if I gave Angel 1 and Skin of Evil a 1, I'd probably give this a 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is empty. I think that's the. I'd say like season 1 for me only ever gets up to a 3, really. Like it's only ever just kind of a competent episode of Star Trek in some ways. And I would say that this is maybe, I think it's competent but not interesting. It's really like a lot of season 1. It's only interesting for like archaeological purposes to like go back and see what things were like back then, and not really, you don't really want to live there. It's like the Middle Ages. You don't really want to live with them, but you are just kind of fascinated by where things came from. I do applaud, and I would bring up again, just for the people who are watching this, like in the context of the other shows, I do think this is the most complicated script that the show ever attempted in its first season. And I think that that's, for how big the cast had got to this point, I think that that was an important thing for the show to do, and to show that they could do it, and you could write stories that had multiple plot lines running concurrently with each other. And this isn't a very complicated version of that, but I think it's a stepping stone towards something better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like I said, I think the pieces are there. You can see the fight between old style Star Trek and what it becomes later in the show and later in the overall series.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you very much, guys, for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Patrons, thank you very much for supporting us in our ability to do this again. We have to have a little bit of a shorter episode today because I have to run off. But Arsenal of Freedom, one of my favorite of the favorite 5 of the first season. Clay, a little bit more indifferent to it than that. That's it. Support the show at patreon.com/thepenskyfile if you're so interested. Otherwise, follow all the social media links down below. Thank you for listening. You can jump ahead to later Star Trek series that we're covering. We're right in the middle of Star Trek Picard's first season at the time of this recording. We finished TNG, we finished DS9, all that stuff. So Thank you very much for listening. Patrons, thank you for supporting the show. We'll see you later.